Hello and welcome to the Legal Genie Podcast with me, Lara Quie. Why am I the Legal Genie? Because I bring out the magic in you and help you make your wishes come true. I practiced as a corporate lawyer in London for a number of years before leaving the law to become an entrepreneur and co-founder of a successful designer kitchen business. Upon selling the business 10 years ago and moving to Asia, I moved back into law, but not as a lawyer. Most recently, I was the Asia Pacific Head of Business Development for a leading international law firm. Due to an unexpected life event in 2020, I discovered the power of executive coaching and recently launched Lara Quie Associates, a boutique consultancy which enables me to work with fun and inspiring people across the globe. This podcast explores the fascinating world of the legal ecosystem and the people within it. From rainmakers at global elite firms to trainees just starting to get their feet wet. From Queen's Counsel, barristers, in-house counsel and the judiciary to legal tech innovators, pricing specialists, HR managers, business development and marketing professionals, legal headhunters and everyone else who is a mover and shaker in this space. My goal is to help you see your world differently. What insights can you gain from hearing others share their experiences? What action can you take as a result? I hope that you will be inspired and learn a lot from this episode. Please enjoy the conversation. Today I'm excited to be joined by Terri Mottershead, a pioneer thought leader in people-centered legal practice innovation for more than 25 years. Terri is currently the Executive Director for the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law in Australia, an innovation-focused think tank providing thought leadership, practical research, and opportunities for collaboration to support legal professionals as they navigate the disruption and new technologies transforming the legal industry. Hi, Terri, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Lara. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you are such a pioneer, as I mentioned, with a very illustrious career. But it would be great if you could share with our listeners a bit of background on your upbringing and also what you wanted to be when you were growing up.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say, and I'm feeling the pressure now. So I was born in Australia and I grew up partly in Australia, but also partly in Papua New Guinea. And actually I've spent pretty close to half of my life outside of Australia. So spent a long stretch of time in Hong Kong as well as the United States. So I guess my background is, for that reason, you know, very kind of internationally or globally focused in a lot of the stuff that I do and a lot of the things that interest me as well. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, I guess in a way, it's the way that the world has gone now in terms of becoming increasingly borderless. And for me, that's a natural place to kind of live and work and operate.
Yeah. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you were growing up? Did you think to yourself, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be something in innovation?
You know, for a long time, I thought I would do something in medicine. So at high school, for example, I didn't have kind of that classic study or subject background that is normally associated with lawyers. So it was not the arts. I studied all of those things like biology and chemistry and physics and maths and all of those things that were much more kind of science orientated. So I have and I retain a very strong interest in, I guess, what we would now call STEM type subjects. But I was kind of drawn to law really in my final year of school because there was something about it, something about the opportunity to work closely with people, to kind of give back, I guess, that was very consistent in the way that I had been brought up in the school that I went to, but also, I guess, probably just that basic philosophy for me. So that idea of how fundamental the law is and how it shapes so many people's lives ended up kind of really drawing me into that area. But, you know, the classic one and all of that is that I really wanted to be a rock star, but, you know, I still aspire to that, but haven't quite achieved it yet, you know.
Absolutely. I think, yes, there's a rock star in every lawyer underneath. So tell us about your current role as Executive Director for the Centre for Innovation, and also your very interesting career journey that actually has led to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the centre, as you mentioned at the outset, is kind of a legal industry focused think tank. And I guess the way that I think about it is that we monitor market trends, of which obviously at the moment particularly there are many, and we take those and kind of translate them into bite-sized practical pieces, things that people can actually use in their day-to-day legal practice. So, you know, if we take a topic, and I'm sure we're going to chat about this, but something like legal tech, that's a huge topic. Where do you start? Where do you start making sense of that in your day-to-day legal practice? And so that's what we do. We take that and we translate that into something that you can actually use. So part of that journey for the centre as well is, when I say kind of legal industry, legal ecosystem, I guess more appropriately, where we're focused, we're not exclusively about lawyers, we're about everybody that's working in the legal ecosystem, and really encourage that diversity and inclusion of thought, of background, of work experiences, because, you know, I think increasingly the legal world that we're in now, we're really only going to find solutions or our next practices by bringing to bear that fabulous richness and depth of multidisciplinary thought and backgrounds to kind of where we want to go to, not where we are, but where we want to go to and where we're moving to. So the centre in that respect is also very much about connecting people, building relationships. And I guess in terms of my background that I've just shared with you, it also focuses or brings those skills to bear, that kind of global network to bear, kind of bringing people together, building those relationships, you know, between countries, between borders, between individuals as well. So, you know, what I do in terms of my day-to-day role, I kind of think of myself as like almost a creative director of our initiatives in a way, translating those trends that I spoke about, you know, bringing people together, facilitating learning and sharing and networking and thinking about things differently. And, you know, I think I have the best job in the world, but I'm biased.
It sounds fantastic. But obviously this is quite an innovative role and is an unusual position to be in. But you did start out a more traditional career trajectory when you started out. So tell us about the actual path that has led to you getting here now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started out as a practising lawyer. I practised in Australia, and I actually practised also in Hong Kong. And but I guess I was a corporate commercial lawyer, and I guess I had this kind of fascination with the business bits of what my clients were doing as well as the legal bits, but also just had this innate curiosity to learn more and do more, and also see what was happening outside my immediate world, which was, you know, at the time in Australia. So I actually moved from practising law in Australia to moving into, I guess, what we call now a pracademic role in Hong Kong at the University of Hong Kong. So teaching practice as opposed to, if you like, doctrinal or black letter law. And so kind of moved from that role of practice into the pracademic, consulting some as well during that time on the side, and my side hustle, I guess we would call it now. But I think also just that focus on the changing skill sets of lawyers and people, you know, other professionals within the law really fascinated me, and I actually moved from the role of being a pracademic into leading talent management functions and consulting in those functions for global law firm associations and for law firms. So I guess, that kind of interest in learning, that interest in practice, but also in doing things differently, ultimately led me to this role in legal innovation. And I guess that deep background in the industry itself as well kind of helped to not just lead some of those innovation initiatives, but actually understand them in a very practical and a very deep way. So I guess, I'm also a great believer in the fact that there's very few people these days that start one career and end their professional life in the same career. We all take deviations kind of along the way. But in many respects, the role that I have now brings together a lot of the things that I have done. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
Sounds absolutely fascinating because, many lawyers are actually pretty risk averse. You mentioned the fact that most people will end up with some form of portfolio career, but actually legal is one of those ones where quite a lot of people will end up, behind a desk for the rest of their lives unless they take action. And it sounds to me like you're someone with, great curiosity, you mentioned, and a growth mindset, a real desire to learn new things, understand the business side. And certainly within law, seeing in corporate, as you were positioned, you will have seen all of these businesses and the kind of things that the actual entrepreneurs were working on. And I can imagine with your background in science, that piqued your interest and you began to explore different ways that you might get more involved in that side. So what about the first time you actually left legal practice, the first role that you moved into something a bit different? How did you feel at that time? And what was the feedback you got from your colleagues at the time?
I was excited, really excited by, and I guess that feeds into what for me is like just a natural, I'm highly motivated by what I don't know. And so I guess I'm always drawn or I'm spurred on by learning different things, meeting new people, thinking about how we can do things differently. And so for me, I was just so excited by the opportunities. And I guess, the reaction from people around me is, I hope, that it inspired them to be excited by those differences and different things and different ways of looking at things as well. Change is a thing that can feel kind of threatening, and I understand that. It can feel uncomfortable, but gosh, it can also be exciting. And I guess I'm in the latter mode. I'm excited by change rather than feeling kind of worried about it or anxious about it. So, yeah, I think it's kind of the way that I think, and I hope that it makes change comfortable for people that I work with and around me.
Yeah. And so there have been a lot of very significant changes in you talked about the legal ecosphere. So what would you say would be some of the most significant ones in the past 20 years?
That's a big time period.
Yes. Sorry, I'll just throw that in.
That's absolutely fine. But look, I guess we've probably got to start with technology, haven't we?
Yeah.
Really. And I mean, it's changed everybody's lives, no matter what industry you're in. But that's the big one, certainly in terms of what it's enabled us to do and how we can do things differently. But I think that the other thing that it's done is helped us to think about things differently. And I look at something not necessarily attached to legal tech, but if we look at something like, for example, the iPhone, it's completely revolutionised the way we think about communication. And I think as, for example, technology in our own industry, continues to expand, it's also helping us to change mindsets, to actually think and approach things differently, approach the way that we work quite differently. So I don't think, and it's important, I guess, that we emphasise it, that technology, for example, is not innovation, but it is an enabler. So it enables a different way of thinking. It enables a different way of working. It enables a different way of communicating. You know, we're demonstrating that right now, and particularly in the year that just was, we've seen that increasingly as well. So I think, you know, that's got to be the other one of the really big ones. I guess in terms of, you know, how that's impacted how we practice law, I mean, ultimately it's made information more accessible, at least for those in the population that have access to technology and so have access to that information. But it's made it more accessible. It's made the purchases of legal services more sophisticated, I think, than they were in the past because of the amount of knowledge, often free, you know, that's available in that way. But it's also allowed lawyers, I think, for that reason, to be able to refocus where they spend their time. So less on the routinized tasks that can be performed with the assistance or by the use of technology or AI, and much more on spending time listening to clients and solving those more complex problems, focusing their energies and adding value really in that area. You know, I don't think, I imagine, I certainly didn't go to law school hoping that I could fill in variables in automated documents for the rest of my life. I went there because I wanted to really be able to work with my clients and solve their problems. And I think it's allowed us increasingly to do that. And as a result, become much more client-centric in terms of how we deliver legal services. So I think that's, you know, another big one. And I guess, you know, finally on this question, again, you know, a big question, but it's helped us, I think, to understand that the delivery of those sorts of legal services really require the expertise and specialisms beyond just lawyers. And I don't mean just in terms of saying that lawyers have no part to play. Clearly they've got a huge part to play, but they're one of many on a multidisciplinary team now. And I think that rise of specialisms, other professions, if you like, within the legal ecosystem has been one of those other really big changes. So tech for sure, changes to the way that we practice being more client-centric, and, you know, thinking about the people that actually deliver those services. And I guess, you know, as a consequence of all of that, an increased or democratisation of legal information and access to justice, I hope, something that I hope continues to grow.
Absolutely. We are hoping that technology, as you say, is very, very much a tool and enabler. And it's true that a lot of people do confuse innovation and technology as one and the same thing. But innovation, yes, is any change that you can bring to something that just makes something better. Yeah. And so it is that focus. And I think, but what we see in the industry is that lawyers do feel threatened by the rise of the technology, lack of understanding of AI, and, you know, the idea that one day they'll all be replaced by robots. Of course, that's something that movies and things like to portray. And certainly there were some very interesting experiments, weren't there, where they used AI against a bunch of lawyers, and the results were pretty interesting. But let's think about what you would recommend that law firms actually do to adapt and to, you know, really service their clients well, but to harness the technology that exists at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that I strongly believe that if you're client focused, then that's always where you start. So who are your clients? What are their pain points? What do they need and want? And sometimes, frankly, Lara, the solution to that will be tech related, and sometimes it won't. So I'm not an advocate of buying technology for the sake of buying it, but really, first and foremost, understanding what your clients want and making their journey to you, you know, as effective, as efficient, as possible, sometimes using tech, maybe not. So, I think really understand your clients in a very deep way. That's kind of the first part. Then I think it's about thinking about what technology you have. And this is the big thing, or the big lesson, I think, that came out of, we can now say last year, right, 2020, is really looking at the tech that you've got and using all the bells and whistles that you've already purchased before you go out looking for other technology or other tech-based solutions. So look at the tech you've got, or I think it's being expressed, love the tech you're with, before you kind of look at anything else. And then I think once you understand what your clients need, perhaps what your tech or other resources are that you need, then focus on getting the right folks to be able to deliver those legal services and products in the way that you want them to. And they may not be the sort of people that you might have previously employed in a law firm. And I'm not talking about just the lawyers and the skill sets there. But again, going back to what we were chatting about earlier, maybe you need a data scientist on staff. Maybe you need an IT person, or maybe you need someone that you can access with that skill set. So really carefully thinking about who you're recruiting and why you're recruiting them. And then I think you do kind of that, almost like that standard grid of, what do our clients want? How do we prioritise what they want? And how do we kind of get, to use that cliched expression, the low-hanging fruit? What can we do to convert that quickly now for things that are helpful for our clients? And even if we see things that are going to be more difficult and take time, look at that and chunk it out and kind of take little projects and start experimenting and start involving and collaborating with different people to bring those to fruition. So I guess, I also see that change agenda, if you like, as one that can evolve over time, piece by piece. And that's probably in many respects, particularly if you're a very traditional law firm, it's going to be one that's going to be an easier way to approach change, whether it's with technology or without, but really kind of chunking it out and building that change over time. But I think the non-negotiable part in all of this, and this is kind of like hopefully not a difficult message to hear, is not changing at all is no longer possible. So sitting with the status quo and just kind of saying, nope, we're just going to, stick our heads in the sand and do nothing at all and make no changes and adapt in no way, that's just not going to work in the legal world that is increasingly evolving and more quickly around us. So I don't think you have to start with everything at once, but you do have to start, and you do have to be aware of what your clients need and want, and first and foremost, focus on them and get the right people, not just lawyers, get the right team of multidisciplinary professionals around you to deliver that.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up just so many things. And one thing that occurs to me immediately is, as you know, I'm based in Singapore, and actually the majority of law firms here are very small practices, maybe 2 or 3 partners together, 5 to 10 partners max. So when we talk about legal technology, we are talking about quite a large investment. So what would be something that you would recommend to a much smaller practice? We're not talking about, Magic Circle, global elite firms who do have the money, which gives them such an incredible head start. But what about the smaller and, the tiny and the mid-sized firms? What should they be looking at first?
Yeah, look, a great question. But here's the thing, Lara, probably most of those folks, just like you and I, have already purchased, for example, Office 365. They've probably all got that operating system, or a lot of them anyway. And if you just look at the functionality, which is obviously over the last year has increased enormously, but just look at the functionality of that product alone, it is really quite incredible. So there's just a huge amount of stuff available there. And, we're communicating today over one kind of platform, but we know, for example, in Office 365, Teams has become kind of one of the highlights for people to communicate just in the kind of video conferencing space, not to mention the project management or the document storage or the document automation. And so we can go on with the word document in it, because that is, obviously a fundamental part of legal practice that's available just in that product. So I would say, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, look at the product that you've got. If you've got Office 365, there is a plethora of resources available to you to really investigate that quite thoroughly, and, if you like, the tools that are available in Office 365. And to say that's not, it's not an insignificant investment, I understand that, but it's an investment that probably every one of those firms and those people of those sizes have probably already made.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're, sort of bringing it down to a more basic level. You're not saying, hey guys, yeah, you should be out there spending millions of dollars. You're saying, actually, even the fundamental technology such as Office 365, you've already got your hands on because you need it. But have you actually investigated all of the different options within that? And it's true that there are lots of elements there that I look at and go, wow, what is this thing? I don't even know what this widget does. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot in there, even within, Excel and within PowerPoint has come a long way, and you can do all sorts of multimedia in there, and there's all of this technology out there. So absolutely. And also in terms of free technology as well. And also things like YouTube, you can practically learn anything on YouTube, can't you? So there is a lot that the smaller firms can, do for themselves without being scared about the amount of investment involved, because it sounds like actually you can start on a more basic level. So another thing that occurs to me is the idea that most law firms still use the billable hour. This horrible, everybody measuring their time in 6-minute increments and all of this. But then if you're using legal technology to its effect, where you're fundamentally outsourcing a lot of the mundane, time-consuming task, what then happens to the billable hour? And how should law firms be thinking about pricing what they're offering? Because obviously that throws that out the window.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we could speak for an entire podcast just on the billable hour. So I'll promise to keep my thoughts, short and contained. But I think that, look, when I was a practicing lawyer, the bane of my existence was having to record my time. And I think the scary part for my clients was the fact that I was recording time. So they were probably realistically less likely to contact me, or I was less able to establish the sort of relationship I would like with them, because they were concerned that every moment, every second of every minute was being recorded in whatever unit or block of time that you wanted. So, to me, and I think we're seeing a lot of or at least an emerging number of examples, certainly in Australia and I think increasingly around the world, of firms that have really been set up, or to be fair, firms that have converted, for want of a better expression, from the billable hour to some form of alternative billing methods. And I hesitate to say alternative, because in many respects so many of these are now really becoming mainstream. So, whether it's value billing, whether it's fixed fee, whether it's capped fees, I guess the fundamental part, or the way that I look at this, and I would offer this up as a thought, as a core thought on this, is that one of the things that you see in any law firm website that you go to, or any lawyer that is suggesting that their services should be recommended over another, is that they have extensive experience to be able to do something. So from a layperson's point of view, coming to that law firm, how can it be that lawyers are so experienced but so unable to estimate what their fees would be or fix them? And to me, that's the fundamental disconnect between the billable hour, what we say we can do, and then how we charge. And so I think the short answer to your question is that in order to be able to establish those relationships, in order to be able to provide the predictability that clients are increasingly looking for, the billable hour goes out the window, and our focus is not on what we charge by the hour, but what outputs we produce that add value for the client as assessed by the client. You know, that's another fundamental building block, I guess. So as a former practicing lawyer, I would and remain delighted for the billable hour to be thrown out the window, as I think either secretly or, to be revealed, most lawyers probably feel the same way, and in favour of basically adding value and living the promise that we've got on all of those websites, that we have lots of experience, so therefore we can give you an accurate prediction of what your costs are going to be.
Yeah, and we mentioned the data scientists earlier. You said that, these teams of people that need to be brought in. The thing that occurs to me is the data scientists are the ones who you need to bring in, especially into the larger law firms, who can analyze. So, how much time is usually spent in an acquisition of this size? How many hours? You can actually get these people to analyze that data and work out what will be a profitable and yet attractive fixed price based on, 100 years of this firm being in existence, right? Because this is exactly what you're saying, that these people, these lawyers with all this experience, somehow still, many of them are not able to accurately predict. I mean, of course, the problem is that every single deal has got variables and blah, blah, blah. But then you would state that, though, in the quote, because the ultimate thing is that you're giving a rough estimate in a way that you don't with the hourly billing. It is so open-ended and is very, very scary for most clients. Having been someone who's instructed lawyers in the past myself, I know what it's like to be a client as well as knowing what it's like to be a lawyer. And with all those tiles, I used to have the carpe diem with all my different tiles going on. And then I'd take a phone call and then I'd be like, oh my goodness, I pressed the wrong button. And now where are we? The whole thing was a mess. So it's a very complicated situation. And I think that's a very good example of data analytics being used in law firms.
You're absolutely right. And I would say, alongside legal tech, which of course is producing more and more data, which is kind of helping as well, that kind of skill set around the ability to understand data in terms of your own business, but also in terms of supporting your clients, and being able to use particularly the increasingly sophisticated predictive analytics to kind of work out when something's likely to go wrong for your client and before it goes wrong, and being able to kind of support them in a very different way as well. Just incredibly, incredibly important. So I think there's no shortage of data, let's be, quite frank, in law firms, and we've always had it. We just really haven't done very much with it. And now increasingly the focus is to do much more with it.
Yeah, I think in a way that's the opportunity for using the technology to analyze all of the information you already have, and see the ways in order to be a more profitable business. And that does involve looking at very difficult statistics, such as which practice areas are genuinely the profitable ones. And the way that most firms these days have to be all things to all people. And actually, that's not a profitable model. And actually, that's what's difficult, because there'll be areas that are, carrying other areas, basically. So it is a ruthless way of looking things once you start looking at data like that. But at the same time, if you ignore the data, you do it to your peril. And I think that law firm management do need to get comfortable with analysing what they have and as you say, hiring people who are going to assist the firm as a whole. But I think one of the problems that law firms have is that whole concept of lawyer, non-lawyer. And, I've been in a business development and marketing function for the past 7 years. And I noticed, of course, the idea that, there's staff and there's lawyers. Luckily for me, being an ex-lawyer, I still managed to squeeze myself into the lawyer category. But there is often that feeling from people coming into law firms who may be the data analysts and project managers and pricing specialists and all sorts of people now coming in. How can law firms change the culture so that it is more diverse and inclusive, as you alluded to before?
Here's the thing, Lara, that I would say to folks that perhaps undervalue the expertise of those around them who are not lawyers. Send them all home today and tell them that they don't have to work at all today, and see how the law firm functions. And if at the end of that day it has functioned as effectively and efficiently as you would like it to for the benefit of your clients, and you've delivered everything that you need to on time, then you're right. You don't need any other specialist or professional to help you deliver your legal services and products. But if, and I suspect this will be the case for 99.9% of the law firms that may be listening to this, if things started to go a little haywire, or there was no one there to solve the problem, or no one there to greet the clients when they came to you, then you've already, that's the proof of concept that a law firm is much more than the lawyers. And I think we just need to have a mindset shift. We are one player. Lawyers are one player or one stakeholder in a very big legal ecosystem, to go back to what we were saying before, which is made up of more stakeholders than we've ever had before. If we don't recognise that, we simply don't draw the best of the talent that we have available to kind of, if you like, collaborate or coalesce for the benefit of the clients and the product or service that we're trying to deliver. It's just simply not possible. Our world is now too complex. There's too many aspects that we have to be focused on at any one time. And our clients are increasingly wanting more and different as well. You can't train any one single professional to do all of those things. It's simply not possible. And if that's true, then every other professional that joins your firm is as deserving of the respect for their specialism as one would expect if you were a lawyer of your own. So I think it's just, again, understanding that multidisciplinary environment. I think it's the mindset shift to understanding that there are many highly specialised people with a highly specialised skill set that is now required to deliver the sort of legal services in a contemporary legal marketplace, and taking the opportunity and that enormous richness of talent to be sure that everyone can thrive. The last thing you want to create is a situation where you're, for example, to go back to the data scientists who were speaking about, where the most talented data scientists that you need in your legal practice won't ever come and work for you, because to do so is a career-limiting move. They will always go somewhere else if that's the environment that we create. So I would say, just open your minds, perhaps open your heart to the way that, legal services and products are now delivered. And actively, if you're a leader or manager of those firms, actively work to change the culture and mindset around that. I mean, we don't, for example, at the centre, use the term non-lawyer because we think in and of itself, if you look at all of the other professions around the world, there are not non-accountants that work in accounting firms or non-consultants that work in consulting firms. It is in and of itself, almost kind of disrespectful and divisive. So while I wouldn't just kind of substitute a word for the sake of it, I think that's also where it starts. It starts with the language and the terminology that we use and how we reinforce the expertise of others around us.
Absolutely. And, I love the emphasis that you have made on mindset. And as you know, I'm an executive coach and I help lawyers with their mindsets. And I'm wondering whether you've had any experience of coaching and whether you know how coaching might help lawyers and people in the ecosystem that you've come across.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's yes and yes to that, both in terms of, being in that role myself, but also being open to and proactively seeking out coaches at different points in my life and career. So I guess on the giving end and the receiving end of that question. And I think that people such as yourself, Lara, and the work that you do as a coach, there are a few things that are just critically important. Firstly, I think, to go back, as we were saying, to that mindset issue, it is offering to the folks that you're working with an alternative way of looking at things, helping them to develop that growth mindset and see things differently, or challenge, perhaps beliefs that have been ingrained for decades. Really helping people to see things differently. I think it is ultimately also keeping folks accountable. So if they're saying they're going to do something, actually to challenge them about getting it done, and if it hasn't been done, why not? So it's a little bit like a personal fitness trainer, isn't it? If you roll up there and you haven't done your exercises for the week before, why not? Why didn't you find the time? I think it's that accountability that's really important. And I think the other thing is it's creating a safe environment to learn and, depending on obviously what the person is being coached for, to experiment with thoughts or how things might play out, almost like, I guess, a preview that they can run, those thoughts by someone and have kind of, again, the questions asked to see whether or not what they want to do is viable, but being comfortable about doing that. And I think, to me, even with your talk with your best friends or your partners or your colleagues at work, sometimes it's not as comfortable to do that for a bunch of different reasons. It might be because you'll feel that your career is not, safe if you have certain conversations with certain people, or you may feel that they will think that the idea is crazy. Well, you get to run that by and to chat that through and have it rationalised and verified in a way through the conversations that you have with a coach. So, I'm a big fan of executive coaches and executive coaching and getting you from A to Z, I guess, also quite often at a pace that is comfortable for you, but in a way that doesn't allow you to offer up too many excuses for not doing what you've identified that you want to achieve.
That's right. It's very much focusing on the future and moving forward. And lawyers are so busy concentrating on billable hours and things like that it's very difficult for them to focus on themselves and their own development unless they literally earmark the time and take that space to be told, right, this is your hour where you can talk about what's going on for you, the challenges you're facing, and get clarity. So I think it is an extremely helpful thing thing right now, especially with the COVID situation and lots of mental health concerns for the legal profession. People are beginning to come towards a phase when burnout is going to be on the rise. This is something we really need to be very mindful of this year. So I hope that lots of people will start to have good conversations and really talk to others. Anyway, it's been a fantastic...
You're going to be busy.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. I do hope I'm going to be busy helping people. So I'm very mindful of your time. Where can people find you, get in touch with you, find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, I guess, in particular. They're the ones, but you'll find us personally, but you'll find the centre in all of those places and on Facebook as well. So, as I said at the beginning, we're all about connecting, sharing, learning. So would love to hear from anyone who would like to reach out and, would love to kind of connect them or chat with them. Whatever suits and whatever is needed, we'd be delighted to be there for you, and I would personally as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Terri. Really enjoyed our conversation today. And I think that there's, you're doing extremely valuable work, and that I hope that lots of people will reach out to you after listening to this podcast. So thanks again.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a delight, and very grateful for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today.
Thank you.